I'm Cathal Summers.
And I'm Deirdre Lynn.
Your Teagasc Sustainability Advisors, and you're welcome to the Teagasc Environment Edge podcast number 44, bringing you the latest information, science and opinion to improve farm sustainability. We've heard warnings for a number of years now about the impact of ash dieback in our forestry sector, but what's the current situation and can we find a solution? On a positive note, the government announced in November that €1.3 billion is to be invested in Irish forestry. Teagasc Forestry Advisor John Casey joins me to discuss. John, you're very welcome to the show.
Thanks, Cole.
I'm on my own today, no Deirdre, so I'm flying solo, so go easy on me, John, but we'll do our best anyway. John, I suppose, look, ash dieback, people have heard about it. There's a fear around it, and hopefully you'll be able to fill us in on the gaps. But first of all, what is it and where did it come from?
Okay, so ash dieback disease, it's obviously it's a serious disease for ash. It's a fungal pathogen. It's called Hypensiphilis fraxina.
Nice handy name.
It is. It rolls off the tongue. It used to be called Chelara fraxina. So people talk about Chelara, but ash dieback disease is what it's known as. So it's a fungal disease. Started in Asia. It's been making its way across Europe for the last, probably since the late 90s into the early 2000s, and it was first recognized here in 2012. Unfortunately, it's a disease. It affects the ash trees, both young trees and older trees, and it has very high mortality.
How did it get to Ireland? Is it brought in on a boat, or what way does it normally come in? Or?
It's believed that it came with nursery stock from the Netherlands. So it came in on nursery stock, they believe, and then it spread out from there. Like I said, it's a fungal pathogen, so it's airborne, so it can travel quite a distance. It could blow up to 40 kilometers.
I remember hearing someone saying that it could have potentially blown across from the United Kingdom side. Is that a myth, or is that a possibility?
Highly unlikely. The prevailing wind is southwesterly, so no, it would have come in with planted stock, I would think.
Yeah. And how bad are we compared to the rest of Europe? Or is it a global issue, or is it just a European-wide issue?
It's mostly a European-wide issue. One of the things is it originates in Asia, and the ash, the ash type of ash trees in Asia have grown with this disease for a very long time, and therefore they're reasonably tolerant of it. It's a bit like smallpox attacking the Indians when the Europeans first arrived. Our ash trees aren't used to it, and therefore it's going to have a very high impact.
Yeah, and I suppose if you have ash trees at home, what does it look like on a tree? Is it easier to identify it?
Well, I suppose what you'll first notice is that there isn't as much leaf as there was in the crowns of the trees. Okay, that would be one of the first indicators. Now, other diseases could cause this as well. So if you're looking at it and the crown looks like it's thinning out and it's not growing quite so much, that would be one indicator. There's also what happens is the inoculum lands on the leaves. It goes then through the petiole into the stem, and oftentimes it forms this kind of characteristic diamond-shaped lesion where the petiole or the stalk of the leaf meets the branch, okay? And that can be a good indicator of this as well. But really you're seeing loss of growth, loss of vigor, loss of leaves on the tree, okay? Particularly if you might get blackened leaves in late May, June down to frost, but if there's darkened leaves on the trees in July and August, it's likely that it's ash dieback disease.
And if you do see something like that, I suppose if you're not sure, if a fool like me that's not really used to looking at certain trees, do we contact someone like yourself, or is there someone you could call? Or
yeah, certainly you could contact. There's 8 forestry advisors with Teagasc around the country. You could contact one of them. They'll talk to you over the phone. We have a lot of information on our website, www.teagasc.forestry. So we could have on the website there's a lot of pictures. You can see it there as well. If you have a plantation, again, you could have one of the foresters come and have a look at it, and we can talk you through what the options are. One of the big indicators for plantations would be if the site is 15 to 20 years of age, it's quite mature. Normally, during the summer, you'd have full canopy closure and you'd have very little briars on the ground. If you're walking around in July and August and there's briars and an undergrowth there, it means there's a lot more light coming in. There's more light because there's less leaves up the canopy. So that would be one of the warning signs, definitely.
Unfortunately, I've gone through this during COVID. Maybe it's because I was more time looking around and walking the fields and that, but we came across an ash tree at home, and we identified it was a problem. I'm going to ask you now if I did the right thing, but what is the procedure if you're a farmer or a forestry owner or landowner at home and you identify that it is ash dieback, I suppose, as regards treatment or removal or replacement of the tree, or what is there a kind of an A to Z guide on what to do?
Yeah, like I said, there's information on the website. The main thing is there is no treatment. Okay, it's not going to happen. You're out in the wild. Even if you treated a tree, it's likely to get reinfected again. So if it's got it, it has it. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing then is it would depend on what the extent of the disease is. Some trees are going to be tolerant anyway, so they're going to get the disease and then they're going to survive it, and that they'll come out the far side. Unfortunately, that's only about 5% of all the trees. Okay, so most trees, if they get infected, are going to die. How fast they're going to die then will depend on the age of the tree and how much stress is on. So if it's a very young tree, it's probably going to die within a year or two. Okay, so if it's a plantation less than 10 years of age. If it's a more mature tree, it could be 3 to 5 years, maybe a bit longer. Okay, so like I said, if it's under stress and it's in very wet conditions, a bit like your own health, if you're under pressure in the first place, you're more prone to diseases. Okay, so it might be the ash dieback disease that would kill it, or it might be some other disease that will come in on the back of that and finish it off.
And should we, how do you dispose of the tree? If you take one down, should you burn it, or is there chemical sprayed with it, or what way does it work?
No, there's no issue with burning it.
Yeah.
Ash makes great firewood. It's a very high calorific value, so dry it out and burn it. Absolutely, would be a great way of doing it.
I'm just
Uh,
wondering if you leave it in the corner of a field or something, is there potential for the dead one to pass the fungus on to other trees, maybe?
there probably is a little bit, but the fact is, if the tree's already died from disease, the inoculum load or the amount of fungus in the area is probably very high anyway. So that bus that bus has already passed by. Yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose once the tree is gone, and is there should you report ash dieback? Is there central reporting systems that the government tracks, or what way does it work?
Yeah, there was a system that was there actually in terms of reporting ash dieback, but I think it was since 2020 or so, they haven't routinely sampled anymore. It's so prevalent now; it's in every county, uh, without fail. So no, it's not reportable as such.
Yeah.
What I would say is that if the tree is going to die, maybe you should consider, if it's a particularly mature tree, could you underplant with maybe shade tolerant species at the time and get those up and going, so that you don't have a situation where you have all tree and then no tree. If you had something else coming up behind it, at least you'd have a bit of cover. That'd be an idea, particularly if it's around the house or around the farmyard or that kind of thing. Within a plantation, there is a reconstitution and underplanting scheme. So there is grant available there for both clearing the ground and for underplanting. So that might be an option as well.
Is there any hope that that 5% that you mentioned of resistant trees could be developed or worked on to create a resistant strain of trees, I suppose?
Yes, Teagasc is working in it at the moment. We identified, I think, about 1,000 genotypes that were Irish genotypes, and we transplanted them into areas where there was a high infection in Lithuania and other places, and then identified approximately 200 genotypes that were tolerant. And what we're hoping to do is to micropropagate those that are proved to be tolerant and be able to produce an ash tree that will be tolerant to the species. The problem with this is it's going to take time. You're looking at a period of probably somewhere between 5 and 20 years by the time you actually prove that they're tolerant and grow them on and everything else. So yes, there will be species of ash into the future, but it's not going to address the trees that are already in the ground.
You're kind of after half answering my next question then. Really, if something goes wrong with our ash trees, and we shouldn't really be planting ash trees from now on, then is that the kind of message? And if you have to replace one, you probably should plant something else until these new hybrids maybe come in.
Yes, my advice would be not to plant ash. In fact, ash is currently off the planting list. You won't get grant aided for planting ash under the current forestry program or the new one that's starting in 2023.
So it's likely our children will be using those bamboo hurls and starting to see popping up all around the place. Is it before this comes online?
Unfortunately, yes. I think you're probably going to be looking at either composite hurls or bamboo hurls. There is going to be a shortage. Some of the hurley makers would estimate that it'll be within the next 3 to 5 years. There'll be quite a constriction. One of the issues is even if the tree is still there, if it has an infection, it tends to stay in the timber, and if it stays in the timber, nobody wants to buy hurls that have stain.
Yeah, look, I'm sure the traditionalists will be crying into their tea now listening to this, but look, I'm sure the other hurls will be as good as the next ones, but hopefully the research comes on board for those hybrid trees. John, I suppose you mentioned that there's some information for people if they want to get in touch. You released a good few videos on ash dieback. I suppose it's hard for people to imagine what it looks like on the podcast, but if you have a link, can you tell me a bit about those videos you released?
Yeah, sure. So, yes, on our website there on the Teagasc Forestry website, we have a series of videos. It's also on our YouTube channel. And what we do is we go through the disease itself, what it looks like, what its impact is, what's your response in terms of alternative species that might work. What could you plant in it to replace it? And there's also some videos on our research as well. So it would be of interest to people that have ash on their land or are looking for alternative species there.
I'm just wondering now, it's a question I have at home, but I was cut down. There's an ash tree. There was a bit of an issue, and it was a young one, and I cut it down. It grows back, John, does it?
Yes, it will. I mean, it will coppice and will grow
Yeah,
back. But what you'll find is that when it grows back, the young stalks will start turning brown because the fungus or inoculum load will be so high that it will
yeah,
kill it off within a year or so.
yeah.
So it will grow back, but it'll die again.
Perfect. Look, we have enough bad news there. Let's go on to a little bit of good news anyway. The government recently announced, I think it was in November, and in fact, that there's an investment of 1.3 billion into Irish forestry. Uh, with this will surely go a long way, I suppose, towards reaching our planting objectives. That's a super amount of money. Can you give us a bit of info on that one?
Yeah, so the new forestry program is going to be run from 2023 to 2027. And as you say, it's 1.3 billion in total. It's an enormous sum of money. Uh, I suppose there's a couple of different things they're going to focus on. Clearly, there will still be production forestry in terms of conifers, but there will also be a much stronger emphasis on broadleaves. Okay, so there'll be a 20% mandatory broadleaf component in all plantations. Whether you want to plant conifer or not, you'll have to put in 20% broadleaves. And the idea is that they will bring the total amount of new planting broadleaves from 30 to 35%. Okay. Outside of that, then you're also looking at continuous cover forestry. You're looking at forest for water on public lands, emergent forests. So, the grants are very substantial. Their premiums have gone up somewhere between 46 and 66%. So it's very high premiums. So, for example, if you're looking at what used to be the native woodland scheme, you're looking at a premium now more than 1,100 euros per hectare per year, and it's 20 years for a farmer. Previously, it was 15 years across the board, but they brought back again this kind of farmer rate. So it's going to be 20 years for farmers, 15 for non-farmers. Even mixed high forests, mainly conifers, it's still 746. Previously, that was 510. So it's very substantial amount of money. The target is to hit 8,000 hectares per year. Is the target. At the moment, it's just north of 2,000 hectares. So there's quite a bit of work to be done. But it's critical that this planting is carried out for timber supply, for carbon sequestration, for biodiversity, for water quality.
I think the government is certainly putting its money where its mouth is. Um, I suppose, I suppose you've been out on a few farms with me, and we've been looking for farmers to plant some forestry. But I suppose the big thing that farmers are nervous about is once you plant, it's in forestry for the end of life, the rest of life, I suppose. But that's not really such an issue, is it?
It is a big deal for some farmers. It is a permanent land use change, and it has to be understood that it is so. However, there is a lot of land out there that could be made permanently into forestry without affecting the productive capacity of farms, undoubtedly. this new forestry program also sort of encourages smaller areas of forestry being planted. So it doesn't have to be 10, 15 hectares. It could be 2 hectares or less than 2 hectares under this native tree area scheme. Okay. So there's different supports there. It could be smaller areas. It could be a combination of not quite hedges and edges, but you could be planting 3 or 4 corners of fields together, and so suddenly you have a small block of woodland. So there are different forest types out there and can suit different areas.
Yeah, and at the end, say of the 20 years, so the payments are excellent for 20 years, and I know you get an initial grant to set it up as well, which is really good. Is it 4 or 5,000 or 6,000, like something like that? Is it? But I suppose what happens after the 20 years? Do you wait for a harvest or do you replant? Or I suppose when I really look into if people are going to dedicate land to it, can they look at this as being every 30 or 20 years they could look for renewed payments and maybe look at possible pension plans for different generations?
Okay, so I suppose the timeline for conifers would be that you'd probably be looking at between 30 and 40 years if you're going for a clear fell system. So that you would plant it, you'd have the premium for 20 years, you'd probably get tinnings at late teens, so say tin it, which is removing some of the crop, at 18, 23, 28, and you might cut it all down at 33, 35. Okay. If you had continuous cover forestry, you might, instead of cutting it all down, you'll remove some of the trees and then have trees coming up behind it. So you'll never completely clear cut it, but it means that you don't have the cost of replanting it all one go. Might work as well. With broadleafs, generally you're looking at an extended rotation length of probably 50 years plus. Now, there is a pilot scheme out there at the moment where they are going to pay forestry that's out of premium, and they're going to pay them a stipend to manage it in more, I suppose, more environmentally or more biodiverse sensitive kind of way. Okay. It's a pilot scheme. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. Okay.
Yeah,
But
no.
in terms of the income stream itself, yes, unless you're harvesting, it will trail off a small bit. Everybody, you're probably going to ask the next question about carbon credits, is it?
I was thinking about carbon credits, all right, because everyone's asking that question.
Yes, it is.
But everyone keeps telling me it's way down the line. Is that true?
It is down the line, certainly.
Yeah.
The EU is looking at trying to bring up a code that is meant to be published for the end of this year, and it's likely that there will be a voluntary carbon code in Ireland within the next 2 to 3 years. One of the questions is, of course, how do you measure this? And it goes back to the same thing with farms at the moment with hedgerows. How do you measure what's in the hedgerow? How much is sequestering? And is this offsetting your production, or is it a way that you can monetize it?
Look, there's no avoiding it. Our tree production is down and we have to increase it. So hopefully the 1.3 billion will go a long way to that. You're in the game a long time, John. What's your opinion? Do you think it'll help re-engage farmers in afforestation?
Certainly, I think it will make it more competitive with other farming enterprises. And what I'm saying is it's a farming enterprise. It's another farming enterprise, but it's the same thing. Our idea of forestry is that it adds to the farm rather than subtract. Okay. But you're looking at income streams quite rightly. How does this compare to any other farming income than any other enterprise? How much money is it going to bring in? 1,100 euros per hectare per year for 20 years is a very substantial amount of money if you go for the broadleaf native forest option. So yes, it will compete, particularly I would think with cattle rearing, mixed farming, that kind of thing. But even amongst dairy farmers themselves, probably 78% of all dairy farmers have forestry. So there is forest out there. And there's no farm, I think, that could not have some trees, either large or small plantations on it, that wouldn't add to their farm.
It's a nice way to put it, actually. It's kind of resonates with me now. Most of us have grown grass all our life. It's a singular crop, or barley all our life. It's just, I suppose we have to start looking in a different way where trees are a crop as well. It's just a longer term crop type. So yeah, it's a good way to look at it.
Like I said, it's another farming enterprise. The whole idea is to have it integrated into it rather than somehow thinking of it as separate to the rest of the farm. Farmers are used to trees and hedgerows. why not have clumps of trees or small woodland areas as well?
Yeah, I think that's the trick to it, that you have the ability to put those small areas in. Look, John, I suppose that's all we really have time for today, but really enjoyed the chat, and thanks a million for giving us an update on what's going on in forestry.
You're most welcome.
You can find more information about forestry and ash dieback on the Teagasc website at www.teagasc.ie/crops/forestry. That's it for this episode of the Teagasc Environment Edge podcast. Thanks to Teagasc Forestry Advisor John Casey for joining us on the show. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. And for more information, go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Cathal Summers. Join us next time for the Teagasc Environment Edge podcast, signpost to farm sustainability.